never once have I learned anything interesting in the second 30 minutes of an hour-long call. The message has to be about the recipient, not about you, if you want to break above the noise. Be the expert in the field. I'm more willing to give you my time knowing that there's a limit to what you're going to expect from me.
I mean, it seems like the answer for you is yes, but can this do anyone else except the founders?
The great problems don't change. And if you're going to dedicate yourself for years and years, pick a great problem.
All right, I'm here with Adam Frankl, who is a DevTool marketing veteran, 3 times first VP of marketing at DevTool or developer-facing companies that went on to become unicorns valued at over $1 billion. Those 3 companies were Neo4j, JFrog, and Sourcegraph. He's also the author of the developer-facing startup book, where you encode a lot of your knowledge, and he's currently advising early-stage DevTool founders on marketing, go-to-market, how to build awareness with developers. Anything to add, amend, change in that intro, Adam?
The only thing I would add is I've got 3 unicorn companies, but before that, I had 9 companies that did not do so well. So I've been trying to do these DevTool marketing for years and years, and I've made every mistake possible, it seems, before I figured out the right way to do it.
Yeah, interesting. And fun fact that I just found out before the show, your grandfather was the cousin of Viktor Frankl, who wrote the book, The Man's Search for Meaning, which is an amazing book.
Which I recommend even ahead of my own book.
You read it 5 times. All right, first question. I mean, maybe with your amendment to the intro, that question is a little bit obsolete, but 3 back-to-back companies that you were the first VP of marketing that became unicorns. Part of that is surely that you know your stuff, and part of that, I assume, might also be picking the right companies. You also do invest in companies, you advise companies. What are the things at that early stage, seed, Series A, that you would be looking at to evaluate whether you want to invest, whether you want to commit your, I mean, I'm assuming you're not going to take another VP marketing role, but if you were in 2025, what were the ingredients, signals that you would be looking for to evaluate betting on that company?
Okay, so the most important thing for in a startup company is not the technology that the company is developing, and that's kind of a bitter pill for founders. The most important thing is the problem. And every time when I took one of those jobs that turned out great, it's because the founder had identified a problem that they needed to solve. And there are small problems and there are great problems. And if you're going to dedicate yourself for years and years, pick a great problem, right? Luckily, software development itself is full of great problems. Software development is people think it's technical. It's mostly a human problem. You have large teams of people with different skill sets and different roles, and yet they all need to come together to produce an amazing product. That is a great problem, and numerous companies that I've worked at have attacked parts of that problem. Right. When I think about the problem that Neo4j solved, it's like not every bit of data fits in a table. Right? There's lots of data that make more sense thinking about it as graphs. And if that's true, then how do you construct technology that takes advantage of that?
Yeah.
So that's my conclusion. The great technology companies are not founded on a piece of technology, because the technology comes and goes. Right? It's astonishing. I mean, just think about where we've come from in the last 12 months, the last 24 months. Technology will change, but the great problems don't change. How do you design a great piece of software? How do you make sure it's sufficient quality? How do you put it into production with high reliability? How do you capture user feedback on it? These are all great problems that you can build enduring companies on.
Are those the categories, or how else would you define or
No,
figure
you
out
define.
if something's a great problem?
So great problems, right, that come in a variety of shapes, right? One of which is, this is a painful problem that absolutely everyone developing software has. And that means you can build a great horizontal solution and get millions of people to adopt it, right? Other types of great problems are you identify a very specific category of developer that has this problem. And for them, this is their top problem or their number 2 or number 3 problem, but it's absolutely a burning priority. And you can identify the people who have this problem and you can address it for them, right? It's got to be important. The worst problems are, oh, there's this current bit of technology stack out there that has this irritating side effect, and I can produce something that just fixes that side effect. And that's worse than a problem that does nothing, because you'll show it to people and they'll tell you, oh, that's very nice. I wish I had it. But if it's no one's top 3 priority, then no one will invest the time to actually adopt it. And today in 2025, there's so much technology change that unless you're solving someone's top 3 problem, the scarcity is the developer time. And not that you're going to save them time, but they don't want to spend time evaluating your product. So find a top 3 problem for someone.
Is it as simple as just asking someone if this is a big problem for them? I assume the answer is a little bit more complicated. What are you listening for when you're
Yeah,
having user or prospect conversations?
that's a great question. Thank you for giving me this puffball question. And the first thing I want to communicate to everyone is that even asking people is not so simple. Okay, there's a trap that many developer-facing startup founders have, which is what they really love to do is they love to write software. And so there's the idea, I have this concept of a product, I'm going to write software, I'm going to put it out, I'll just put it out on GitHub and people will find it. And then people will download it and I'll write more software and people will download that and I'll write more software and people will download that. And that seems like a very happy way to spend your life. But honestly, that's a hobby. That's not a business, right? The difference between a hobbyist and an entrepreneur is that a hobbyist is just doing something they love doing, right? An entrepreneur is actively seeking out a market need and filling it. And in seeking out a market need, you need to be talking to your users and your customers, right? And not just having sales pitches and demos, but actually listening to them, right? And listening to them in a way that's more of a relationship than it is a transactional call. This is hard to do. And I figured out it's hard to do after working at failing startup after failing startup. And then I figured it out, and it didn't come to me originally. I read a book by Steve Blank called 4 Steps to the Epiphany.
Mm.
And Steve Blank has this original idea, which is get out of the building and talk to customers, which wasn't what I was doing 20 years ago. And so I decided, all right, I'm going to actually try this idea because I've tried everything else and nothing else worked. And in my case, I'm going to go talk to developers. And to my shock, it worked. And that's, the first time I tried it was at Neo4j. And we created a brand new category of graph databases. We invented the term graph database. It didn't exist before Neo4j, right? By paying attention to our developers who knew what they wanted. Part of the key insight I really want to tell people is founders think they're pretty smart. After all, they're startup founders, right? But you have to take a dose of humility and realize that the developers who are using your technology are also pretty smart, right? A lot of the times they're smarter than you are, right? Don't fight that. Accept that. Find a way to bring them in to the development process. In fact, to the company development process as well. And some of them will be absolutely delighted to help you out.
So
I think, yeah. Go
when
ahead.
you are
Ask a
meeting
question.
these users, these customers, are you demoing the product? Are you just
No.
asking discovery
No.
questions? Are you using the
No.
mom
Well,
test?
yes and no. So after literally decades of struggling through the wrong way of doing demos and doing pitches, doing transactions, I've come up with a system, and that I've tried at multiple companies, and it's worked. And that's what pretty much is the core of my book. And I call this system the Technical Advisory Board. Because a lot of people, they think they know what a technical advisory board is, and they think, oh, I'm going to get my last boss who loves me and is pretty smart, and I'm going to get my dissertation advisor on that, and they can give me advice too. That's not a technical advisory board. I mean, those are great advisors and they can help you, but a tab is something different. A technical advisory board is a set of people that might use and or buy the software that you're creating. I say and or because many developer facing startups have a strategy that's free for developers, and then you sell a premium, to the company. That's not the only business model. I'm just saying that that's common. Now, once you get people on your technical advisory board, you invite them in. What exactly does being on a technical advisory board mean? Okay. Well, I've got a very specific plan. So if you've got your own ideas, great. If you don't, then I'll give you an idea to start with. Being on a technical advisory board means you do a 30-minute Zoom call once a month for 6 months. And that all parts of that are important, right? If the problem you're solving is important to your prospective tab member, then they can give you 30 minutes in a month, right? If you're having trouble recruiting people to your technical advisory board, that's because the problem you're not solving is not one of your prospective tab members' top 3 problems, right? The main payoff to a tab member, right? Don't pay them, right? There's a school of thought that says you should give them, stock options. I recommend against it, right? The reason people want to join your tab is they want you to be successful. They want you to solve their problem, and they want to make sure that you are solving their exact problem. That's the reason why people should be on a tab and why you should listen to them. Then you get them on a call, 30 minutes, because I've done thousands of these interviews over my career. Never once have I learned anything interesting in the second 30 minutes of an hour-long call. Doesn't happen. Okay. And in the old days before Zoom, I used to drive out and meet people face to face and have lunch with them and that sort of thing. And while that's great, right, it certainly gets people to open up more. The problem is you can only do 1 or 2 of those a day, and you need to do lots of interviews. That's the other thing I've learned, right? 3 or 4 people on a tab is not enough. You
How
need to
many
be
do you
thinking
need?
30 or 50. I recommend 50. Some of my most successful clients have done more than 200.
Wow.
Okay. But that's about the level of research that you need to do, right? 5 is not enough.
So that's 50 to 200 monthly calls. And is that all, like, in your opinion, you were
Well,
the marketing head taking those calls, or?
not if let's say 200 interviews, okay.
Okay.
But I would say if you can get it in your in your normal pattern to be doing a call every day, that's 20 a month, right? If you can do average 2.5 a day, that's 50 a month. When you're starting off, try and do 50. Okay,
Right.
you will learn so much. Okay. Now the question is, how do you know when you have enough? Okay, when you do calls and you don't learn anything new,
Mm.
right? And this happens a few times. You can say, all right, now the marginal value of every additional call is getting lower, right? I can stop doing it. If you're doing calls and you're still learning things about your problem, then you need to keep doing calls. Also, there's the question of, who do I do calls with, right? Do I just target my exact user? And the answer is no. You actually need a diversity of people on the calls. Okay. When you first start off, you should just brainstorm and you think about all of the roles that are involved in bringing your technology in, right? Maybe you're selling to product engineers. Maybe you're selling to SREs, right? Maybe there's a security role, right? Maybe there's a CTO or a VPE influence. And if you think this person has a role in bringing your technology in, you need to include multiple people who match this role into your technical advisory board. Now, what often happens is people will brainstorm and they'll come up with, I think there are 12 possible people who my technology touches. Okay. But then you start doing interviews and you find out things like, for this particular technology, like the SRE isn't interested, or for this particular technology, there's no difference between a front end engineer and a back end engineer. So you can just collapse that. And so what often happens is you'll start off with 12 hypotheses, but you'll end up with 3. But the way you collapse them down is you interview people and then you look at the answers and you say, these two personas, I thought they were different, but they give me the same answers to my questions. They're really the same persona from my specific perspective. Maybe a different product, you would split them out differently.
And I know we're spending a lot of time on this, but I do feel like it solves a core problem that
This
at
is the
least,
most important thing.
yeah. Do you just cold email them and you send that CTO on LinkedIn a message and say, hey, we're building, this thing and I'm looking for feedback. Are you open? Question mark.
Close, but no. First of all, I love LinkedIn messages because you get to actually look at look at the resumes of the people you're about to message, right? You don't just get like a list of email addresses, and you do reach out to them, right? You reach out to people you know and to people you don't know, and you start with the people you know, and then you ask them if they know anyone. They can give you at least a warm introduction, but you also have to reach out to lots of people cold. And when you do reach out to people, okay, the message has to be about the recipient, not about you. And this is a trap that most people fall into. They say, hey, I have founded a company. I have gotten angel funding from so-and-so. I have been accepted to this accelerator, right? My product has been on Product Hunt, blah, blah, blah. It's all about you, okay? Those messages are so easy to ignore, right? Especially now when you have, AI generated messages. If you actually want to talk to people, you need to personalize those, and the message needs to be about the recipient, right? You say, thank you for opening this email, right? And then your background at this company is amazing, right? The post that you wrote was very insightful. I loved your paper about this, right? Something that they've done, right? Personalize it. For me on LinkedIn, if I read a post and in the first 5 words I can see it's not personalized, I just don't bother reading anymore. Okay, so first you need to personalize it for everyone, and it doesn't take that long. Like 60 seconds should be enough. If you don't have the time to invest 60 seconds in writing me a personalized LinkedIn message, then I'm not going to bother returning it. Okay, personalize it, praise them, something they wrote, something they've done, something great in their background, right? And then say, I founded a startup to attack this problem, right? I would greatly appreciate it if you would consider joining my technical advisory board. If this is interesting to you, right, then please reply and I'll tell you what it involves. Really short. Don't include your whole company background, or don't include links to your CV. Don't include your college courses. No one cares. It's about the recipient. It's not about you. And it's not even about your product. Don't even talk about your product. All I want to see is your description of the problem. And people should look at this problem and say, yeah, I'm struggling with that problem right now. 30 minutes, because you might have learned something interesting. That sounds like a good trade-off.
Yeah.
Right. And then, okay, I need to get to the other point. It's not transactional. You have to have these meetings repeating over time, because what you want is a relationship, not a transaction. Because developers know how to deal with sales calls, which if you're setting up a one-time call to do a demo, that's a sales call. And the answer is, I'm going to tell you nothing because we're negotiating, and anything I tell you will be used against me. We're going to talk every month for 6 months. That's a relationship, right? Sounds like you actually want my advice, and I'll be much more open about it. But there's a cutoff. I'm not agreeing to marry you, right? There's a deadline at the end of it. It's going to go away at 6 months, right? So I'm more willing to give you my time, knowing that there's a limit to what you're going to expect from me.
And then how do you best make most use of those 30 minutes that you get with those people?
So important. 30 minutes, it's not a lot of time. Okay. So my recommendation is that you come up with about 6 questions. That's all you're going to have time for. Okay. 6 questions, and you ask absolutely everyone the same 6 questions. It's not a conversation, it's an interview. Because if you make up the questions as you go, you've got no way of comparing the answers, and you're really trying to learn about this role. If you ask everyone the same questions, then you become a connoisseur of the answers, and you start saying, oh, I've heard this before, or in this circumstance, this person likes to answer like this. And when you get an anomaly, you can identify it as an anomaly.
And when you say everyone the same question, is it also across personas? So the CTO gets the same one as the product engineer?
Yes, the same questions across personas, because that's how you get to understand how the personas are different.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because in my experience, different personas have different problems. Okay, often wildly different problems. There's this part of the craziness of this industry is you can have two people working side by side, like at adjacent desks for 10 years, and they will not be able to identify the other person's top three problems. Right? It just doesn't come up. They struggle with it, and part of the struggle is no one's really interested in your problems, right? Your partner isn't interested, your manager isn't interested, your kids aren't interested, right? So a startup founder calls you up and offers to talk about your problems. People
Mm-hmm.
love to talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
That's the number one topic of interest to most people is talking about their problems.
And I'm
Okay.
assuming those 6 questions are open-ended, or
Well, let me tell you what my three favorite
okay.
questions are. And my recommendation is that you pretty much take, either these questions exactly or some variation of them and use it all the time in your first questions. The first question is the magic wand question. And it goes like this. If you had a magic wand and could change anything about the problem, you put your problem in there. What would it be? Don't worry about if it's possible, just anything.
Mm-hmm.
And then you wait. Because most people, they've never been asked this and they need to formulate a reply, right? And they will tell you amazing ideas. Then you say, whether or not their idea was on your roadmap, you say, if we could deliver that to you, how would that change your life? And you wait. Because the answer to the second question is what you're actually selling,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's the famous story, right, about that Steve Jobs used to say about Henry Ford. I haven't found any record that Henry Ford actually said it, but supposedly what Steve Jobs said, Henry Ford said, if I asked customers what they wanted, they would have said faster horses,
Yeah.
right? Well, okay, you're going to get that reply. You ask this, what would you want? Faster horses, right? But then you say, if we could deliver that to you, how would that change your life? Right? And it's all of a sudden, put yourself back in Henry Ford's time, right? It means that I could live in the country and work in the city. It means, I could get my goods to market over much longer distances, right? These were the benefits that Henry Ford was selling.
Mm-hmm.
But so don't worry about the answer to the first question. Worry a lot about the answers to the second. And the third question that I love to ask is, what we've just been talking about, what makes it more valuable today than it would have been a year or 2 years ago? Because what you're looking for is what is the undeniable trend that is making this problem worse
Hmm.
every day. And if it isn't addressed, one day will be catastrophic. Because as a startup, you absolutely need to identify urgency, because people were being successful yesterday before they heard of you, right? That's why they're in the job they're in, okay? And yet you need to convince them that tomorrow they're not going to be able to live without you. And the way to do that is to understand how is the problem getting worse and what's going to happen if they don't address it, right? That's going to be the only thing to convince them to actually adopt technology from a startup. Because you'll learn, people love startups and they love talking about their problems. They just hate buying anything from startups. So you don't ask them to buy anything, ask them for advice instead.
I mean, it seems like the answer for you is yes, but can this do anyone else except the founders?
That's a great question, right? Can anyone else ask these questions but the founders? Because it seems like anyone should be able to do it, right? Let me tell you, I did this as a VP of marketing, so not as a founder, right? And I found it was so absolutely amazing. After I decided I was no longer going to do operational roles, I did it as a consultant. And I prepared these thick research reports for CEOs, and they'd land on their desks with a thud. Okay. And there was a lot of good work in there, and sometimes the CEOs would read it and sometimes they wouldn't. And then I realized I was doing the wrong thing, right? This in-depth customer research is what a founder does. So I stopped doing it as a consultant and I started teaching founders how to do it. And that absolutely struck much better. I've taught dozens and dozens of founders how to do this because this is the essence of what an entrepreneur needs to do. He needs to be listening to people, identifying problems, right? Figuring out what is the real market need and how am I going to deliver something that fills that need.
And I'm assuming as you're doing this, you are building the MVP. You're trying to build some of those things that people suggest on the call, and then maybe you bring it to your next call, and you do you then demo something like, "Hey, you told me this last call. We built this. What do you think?"
So first of all, you do have to be building a product, right? But the question, the most important question that a founder or CEO has to think about is how much of my time is spent building the product, how much of my time is spent working with users and customers, right? And if the answer is 100% on one and 0% on the other,
Sure.
that's wrong. Okay, where on the spectrum is going to be different for every company, and this is like the most important thing that a CEO has to figure out. Okay, so my recommendation on the tab is the first call, you don't even discuss that you have a product. Okay, because the point of the call is for you to understand the problem, right? The second call is about validating the problem. And you say, I talked to a few dozen of your peers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Here's what they have to say are, the most important problems in your industry, right? Do you have this problem? Yes or no? Why or why not? Right? First of all, I say, does your company have this problem? Then I say, do you specifically have this problem? Right? If you have the problem, are you committed to solving it in the next 6 months? Why or why not? Right? Then, are you committed to solving it in the next 6 weeks? Why or why not? Because the number one killer of startups is you produce a product that solves a problem that's not urgent for anyone. Right? You have good meeting after good meeting, but nothing ever happens because people only work on their top 3 problems. Okay, that's the second meeting. You validate the problem. The third call is usually about how much of the problem do you need to address. That's when you can introduce the fact that you have a product, okay? But you don't demo the product, right? You start saying, an early, beta user of our product reported that they were able to do this. If you were able to repeat that, does that address your need enough? Yes or no, why or why not? Okay. And sometimes they're going to be astonished. Says, you have a product that can do that? I can use it right away. In which case you can start transitioning into a sales motion.
Mm-hmm.
But often you'll learn about it and says, well, that would be interesting, but that doesn't really solve my problem.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's the key for you to understand. Right. Or, well, you solve this, but here's the other thing that prevents this product from being useful for me. Right. And that's the most important thing for you to understand. Whereas if you're just demoing it, everyone's complimentary to the demo. It's obviously put in a lot of work, but they're still not going to adopt it.
Yeah. There seems to be no consensus, and maybe you disagree around when to hire your first marketing leader. I've seen some company do that at seed stage. We just started working with a DevTool company that just raised a Series C, and now they're hiring the first marketing leader. What do you think is the right time to hire a legit marketing leader, not someone who helps out with a couple marketing?
All right. So there are 4 marketing. Let me talk about your first 4 marketing hires. Okay. And your marketing leader might be the first of those 4, or she might be the 4th. Okay. You're going to need a DevRel role, someone who goes out there and prepares content for developers. You're going to need a demand generation manager, someone who uses the content the DevRel person creates to actually get people to try your software and create leads if you have a sales force. You're going to need a community manager role to organize events, both online events and in-person events, right? And you're going to need a leader of the marketing team, right, to organize those 3 people and provide strategy and direction. So those are the 4 roles you're going to need. Now, it depends who what background and the inclinations of the co-founders, right? If one of the co-founders feels comfortable taking on the marketing lead role in addition to everything else, great. do that, right? If one of the co-founders, often your CEO will act as head of marketing, your CTO might act as DevRel, right, when you're first getting started. And that's fantastic because the founders need to understand the role, right? The reason to bring on a head of marketing is you're ready to scale it, right? You found some type of fit in the market, right? And maybe it's product market fit, maybe it's just message market fit, right? You found something there and you need someone to scale it up with specific expertise that founders typically don't have. Great, time to bring on that role. But until you have figured that out, the founder needs to be the one figuring that out, because the VP of marketing, executives execute. That's what they do. Okay, you bring in a VP, and I've been a VP of marketing many times, right? You bring me in, I love to execute. Okay, but the job of figuring out what the company is about, that's what a founder does, right? That's different from execution, right? So the typical model is a founder should come in, be working with customers, figuring out the market need, figuring out how they're going to solve that. And then typically founders transition into executive roles over time. Okay. Sometimes founders need to hire executives because it's just a different, executing is just a different skill set from having a vision and being able to communicate that vision successfully, right? At the very early stage, figuring out your messaging and figure out how you're going to get in front of people who can adopt it, right? That's a founder job, right? If you outsource it, the problem with hiring a marketing executive too early is you hire the wrong person. And this is a pathology I've seen over and over again, which is you'll have some highly technical founders with a great vision for a product. They bring on a head of sales from a B2B background or a head of marketing from a B2B background. And these people are highly successful with what they've done. And they start putting into place the exact same programs that made them successful at their last company. But it wasn't exactly the same target. Perhaps it wasn't a developer that was the target. It was some other type of business executive, right? They run these programs that were successful for them in the past, possibly multiple times, and the programs fail because developers are not business executives. It's not the same culture. They don't have the same priorities. And then these transplant executives, they last about 6 months, then they throw up their hands and they say developers hate marketing, and they leave. And you've wasted 6 months.
Right.
And no startup has 6 months to waste nowadays.
Now, maybe this is an impossible question, but the last time you were in an operational role was, I think, in 2021 at Sourcegraph.
Yeah.
If you were to join a DevTool company today in 2025 as their first VP of marketing, and let's say they've done all that work, they've built their technical advisory board, they've built the solution, they've found traction, let's say they're doing, I don't know, 3 million in revenue. There's something going. I'm sure it depends on a million different things, but what would be some of the things you would be looking at in 2025 to implement?
So I've got two things that should be a priority above everything else, right? Number one, right? There is so much noise everywhere, right? There's so many DevTool companies, which is great, but the competition is intense, right? The way you rise above the competition, it's not, oh, I'm going to schedule my LinkedIn post for 3 a.m. because that's no, forget all that crap, okay? Is that one of the founders or someone at the company needs to be recognized as a world-class expert in the problem, okay? Because developers honestly follow developer influencers, and they've been doing this for 30 years, right? They didn't used to call them influencers, but every developer has a bookcase of O'Reilly books, and they know which ones have helped them, and they know the authors of those, okay? And these are the same people. They follow them on social media. When they give talks at conferences, they go. When these persons at a meetup, they make a point of going to that meetup. These are people who have helped them in their career. Why? Because they are experts on the problem that that developer is facing. So one of the founders could be the CEO, could be the CTO, right? Or if you don't have a founder that's suited for this role, you hire someone and call them your chief scientist, right? Their job is to become a world-class expert in the problem and put out research that helps people solve this problem. Here's a funny thing, right? One of the reasons why this industry is in such a mess was Google was so easy to fool, right? Developers always wanted research, right? But what they got instead was they got search engine optimized content. Okay, that wasn't what I wanted. I wanted research. I wanted someone to actually spend time thinking about the problem and thinking of solutions and evaluating them and publishing on that. And instead, I just got streams of documents with random words stitched together that were search engine optimized. Okay, and now AI is making this all worse, right? The way to combat the search engine craziness and GPT craziness is by creating an actual authority in the field, right? And when I say an expert or an authority in the field, right, what I don't mean is, oh, I have a scientist who has a PhD in this and he's read every book and he will issue proclamations about why I do it. No, that's boring, right? I want to have someone who's highly technical, that has had 100 conversations with highly technical people about this problem, right? And when this person says, I've talked with 100 experts in the field about this problem, and here is what people generally agree about it, that is interesting. If I have this problem, I want to, listen to that or read that. Okay. So become an authority. And it doesn't matter if you're posting at 6 a.m. on LinkedIn. If you put out high quality content, right, from a known authority, I will figure out a way to get it. I'll even buy your book. Go get it from O'Reilly.
So
And
does
then
it?
once okay, go ahead.
So then, I mean, what you're talking about is putting out content. Does it matter? How would you pick
I
the
hate that word
platform?
content. No, don't. To me, when you say putting out content, let me tell you why I hate the word content. Because I remember years ago, I was working with a company that was doing automated code review, right? I thought, well, a great concept. Whenever you find a best practice that everyone agrees is a best practice, but few people do, like code reviews, right? Then, okay, there's potential for a company here. And I was talking with the founder about what they were doing to become an authority on this. And he said, oh, I hired a tech writer and I contract with them. They're going to write 80 blog articles. And it's like, that's the opposite
Right.
of what I want you to do.
Right.
Okay. This person doesn't know anything, has never done a code review, will never do a code review. All they're going to do is Google other people's ideas about code reviews and rewrite them as your own blogs. That's not research, that's content. And most content is crap, honestly. And most developers know it's crap and they don't have to go to your page. They can just look at the Google search result page, if anyone is still doing that, in 2025, and say, no, this is all crap. I'm going to skip it. But you have someone who actually develops expertise, right? And you say, oh, something by Martin Fowler, I'm going to read, right? He's the real deal. That's the level of expert that you need to have in your company if you want to break above the noise. Be the expert in the field. Okay, that's the first thing you need to do. And the second thing you need to do is social proof. For developers, there is no proof like social proof. People think demos work with developers. It does not. Let me tell you, I've seen thousands of demos. They're all the same. Okay. But give me a 60-second video of a peer talking about how they solved the same problem that I'm solving now. I find that completely compelling. Right? Go out, work with your early users and your early customers, right? Make compelling social proof. And the best format I've ever seen that is short videos. It's often shocking to developer-facing startup founders when I tell them, go look at the stats on your website, right? What's your mobile versus at desk? And before they look, they'll think, oh, people do this at work. It's be at desk. It's like, no, they're looking at your web on the phones. They're in line at Starbucks, okay? And they're on their phones. And if you have short video of a customer, basically a peer of the person you want to influence, talking about how they've solved their problem, they'll be entranced. That's who they want to hear from. They don't want to hear from the founder. Let me show you a demo. Let me show you how brilliant I am, because I so want to explain how it works. No one cares how it works. People want to know, what have my peers accomplished? Because if it's good, I will want to accomplish the same thing.
So let's go. So social proof and having one person be the kind of recognized expert. Just to go
It can
back,
be more than one. Can't be less than one.
let's call it research, not content. Does it matter
Right.
whether it's LinkedIn or a newsletter or Twitter or I don't know, Reddit or a blog? How would you pick
Yeah,
in
it matters. Your
2025?
users will tell you, right?
Hmm.
So, there are two ways to figure this out, right? The no thinking way is just publish what you have everywhere and see what gets a response. Okay, a lot of people seem to take that strategy. There's a better strategy, right? Which is just right now, open up, Google Doc, write down the names of the 40 most influential influencers in your category and an adjacent category, right? If you have to Google them, then they don't belong on that paper. Just people you recognize, right? You've read their books, you've attended their talks, write down their names. Then go figure out where they're posting and then go post there because they've already assembled the audience, right? People are already following influencers, right? You want to go where the influencers have already created the audience. And if that's on LinkedIn, if that's on Reddit, if that's on Dev2, right? Figure out where the current influencer are posting and then you post too, right? And then interact with them, put comments on their blogs, right? Figure out some way to, highlight your expertise. And then some people, interview them. And then some of their audience will become your audience. And you do this over time. And that's how you become a developer influencer.
How would you support or enable your let's say we have one of the founders, we pick whatever the CEO or the CTO to become this person. How do you enable and support them? Because often this writing, being active, commenting, engaging doesn't come natural to many technical people.
That's a great question. And every person in this role has to decide what is most natural for them, right? If you love talking about the problem, put together a podcast, right? If you like writing together the problem, write a blog. Okay. If you like putting short thoughts together, be on X, right? You've got to find a way that works with you naturally, because if it's forced, it will never work. Okay. And if you think about research, what does research involve, right? Is research some big complicated thing? No. Research is basically two things. One is having an original idea. Two is publishing. That's it. My wife was an academic for many years. Those are the two things you're expected to do, right? So if you can't have original ideas, don't go into this role, right? But if you do have original ideas, then the second part of the job is publishing. And, in our industry right now, publishing means social media. There's lots of different social media out there. You got to pick one. Well, I'll tell you what it doesn't mean. Publishing does not mean writing 6-page papers with footnotes and citations the way you were trained to do in grad school. No one reads those. Okay. You might do that because that's what you're comfortable doing, but then figure out how to chop it up into, X-sized pieces, because that's what people actually want to read.
I mean, I'm sure you'll disagree with this with this representation, but probably some people would call this founder brand nowadays. Do you think there's a right time and place of company scale where this makes more sense versus not?
Yeah, I'm not sure I like the term founder brand, but I'm not completely opposed
It's
to
kind of
it,
going there,
right?
yes.
Yeah, brand. Okay, well, I've got a problem with brand. I think, and let me talk briefly about where this came from. Did you see the HBO series Mad Men?
No, I watched a couple episodes, but no.
Okay, it's about the growth of the advertising
Yeah.
industry, in the 1960s. And that was the real, the gigantic growth of brand. And brand is important when you're competing in a field with a mature category and your product is pretty much identical to your competitors. You can't compete on product, so you need something else to compete on, and you compete on brand. We're not doing that with developer tools, not in 2025. All right. You should be competing on what is the original point of view that makes you different from every other dev tool out there. Okay, so it's really founder point of view, I'd say, rather than founder brand.
I like that.
And when I say point of view, I mean something very specific and actionable. Okay, here's how you define a point of view. Point of view, 3 to 5 short declarative sentences that you know to be true, but at least one of your major competitors or alternatives acts as if it's not true. Okay, that's your point of view. And all of your communications should be expressing in part or in whole your point of view, because that's what makes you interesting. If your point of view is not different from your competition, what makes you interesting? Nothing. So I'd say founder point of view is very important, and how you express that point of view. Okay, and does it scale? Well, let me tell you, when you're first starting at an early stage, this is the only thing that works. Okay, you can't afford ads, right? You can't afford sponsorships, you can't afford conferences, but you can afford to have a point of view. In fact, it's a requirement to have a point of view. Later on, as you get more customers and revenue and funding, you will find out that there are ways to scale this point of view, right? All the way up to buying a billboard. But when you first start off, that's the great thing about founder marketing, is you don't have to spend money. You just have to spend brain time on it.
So it's the only thing that you have in the beginning. At a later stage, it becomes less important. You scale it down. Founders take on different roles.
It stays important, but other things also become important, right? You hire a marketing team that's able to expand your point of view in many different directions. But it's still the founder's job to maintain the original point of view. Sometimes people call this a vision as well. I don't like to use the word vision because everyone has a vision. It's so hard to define vision. So that's why I learned the term point of view from Christopher Lockhead.
It's a really good definition. I'm going to throw you one question. I know we only have 4 minutes left, but I mean...
I could talk about this for hours and hours. In fact, I've written a whole book about it. Let me pitch my book here.
No, I love it.
Available on Amazon, the developer-facing startup.
There you go. Should everyone build a category?
When you say everyone, right, there's nothing that everyone should do, right? You have a choice as a founder. You can either design a new category, or you can compete in a category that someone else has designed. If you define a new category, right, then you get to tell people what's important and what's not. And if the category is successful, the category definer usually ends up with the lion's share of the revenue and the profits. It's not always true, but I'd say usually. If you can just take on an existing vendor with a product that improves in one dimension that's very important to people, and you really want to compete inside this category, you can. You run the risk that you'll never exceed the original vendor, but it's not impossible. It's a strategy question, and there are companies that have been successful doing it either way. To me, the companies that create new categories are the more interesting companies.
Yeah.
Right? If you're competing with someone else head on, all you need to do is explain how you're different than the leader, and that's all your marketing should be about, because the leader is already spending all this time to educate people on why they need a product from this category.
I mean, it seems to me that if you have a strong point of view with your definition, almost by definition, at some point you'll be defining a new category.
Yes and no, but the industry, it takes effort to define a new category, and the industry will want to lump you in with someone else, right? The problem is, as Jeffrey Moore pointed out 30 years ago, at some point categories go from early adopters to the majority, and when you're selling to the early majority, the capabilities of your product become less important than which product is number one. Early adopters love technology, but the majority of people, they just want to buy the product that everyone else has, because they know they can hire people that know how to use it. Everyone will integrate to it. They'll find lots of support for it. Okay, and that becomes more important than the specific features that you're selling.
And no one. What's the saying? No one got ever fired for buying an IBM.
Yeah, well, it's kind of funny. That was true for decades.
Yes, until it wasn't.
Now, what happened to IBM? Right?
Yeah. Interesting.
The last time I heard from IBM was Watson, and the last time I read anything about Watson was what, a decade ago.
Well, Adam, I feel like we could be talking for many more hours, and I had many more questions on my list, but I think we did some really great deep dives into point of view into how to validate whether you have a good idea, what is a great idea, how to build that early traction, when to bring on a head of marketing, and what that early marketing team should look like. So I think there will be plenty of nuggets in here for people. If people want to check out more from you, obviously I'll link up your website, your LinkedIn, as well as your book. People can buy that on, I'm assuming, Amazon and many other places.
Amazon is correct.
There you go. So we'll link up the Amazon. And Adam, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you very much, Finn. This has been a lot of fun.